The information provided is not a substitute for legal and other professional advice where the facts and circumstances warrant. People should always consult their own legal or other professional advisors and discuss the facts and circumstances that apply to their specific circumstances. The information shared on Ask the Landlord is for educational purposes only.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Landlord with your favorite landlord, Albert Dweck. I'm Melissa. I'm one of Albert's producers and a former New York City renter. And together, we're going to be asking this landlord some questions. My question today is about problem solving. My landlord isn't responding to any of my questions or requests about an issue. The lights in my stairway are out and I'm scared I'm going to fall down the stairs. What can I do about a landlord that's not being communicative?
That's a great question, Melissa. Really, you're asking, I need this issue taken care of. It's urgent. And how can I get it taken care of? My landlord is unresponsive, unwilling for whatever reason, you know. And I think we've talked about before making sure you've gone through the steps to communicate the issue in person, or not in person, but on the phone, in writing, whatever, and what I'm going to advocate or remind, as I said in the past, you keep track of these efforts. And even if you haven't kept track before or until now, keep track. Like, here's what I did. I did this. I called you on this, and sometimes you can look at your cell phone records and say, oh, here's when I called or whatever. So at least you have that, so you could really, protect yourself. Okay. So the important thing to remember is identify the issue and solve the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what happens with these situations is you have tangential things that annoy you that are also issues, but you have to figure out what the primary problem is, right? So I think, and this is a great example because it happens to me, it happens to everybody. Meaning, it happened to me as a resident, it happens to me as a landlord, it happens to everybody. It's like, you're living there and you have something that's bothering you and it's in your face, and it's not in the landlord's face. And if they can't be communicated or whatever reason they can't get to it, they're not fixing it. It's not in their face. So now your question is, what do I do about that? I've tried to communicate effectively with the landlord and it hasn't worked. So my first advice is make sure, obviously, that you've communicated with the landlord in the way that you can show somebody what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, really, really, and then, now it's like you're getting into a zone where you might self-correct the issue.
Meaning what?
So what's that? You have a question?
What is that? What do you mean self-correct the issue?
Meaning you're saying there's a light out in the hallway, right? Mm-hmm. And it's dangerous because it's dark and you don't feel safe. And you're like, I keep calling to change it, but no one's changing it for whatever reason. I'm like, you change it.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you change it as a tenant and tell the landlord, I'm going to change it, or I'm going to have someone fix it. So I'm going to fix it. Here's the supplies and the amount of time it took me to do that. Here's the expenses associated with it. Keep track. I'm going to deduct it from my rent. Now, you could tell the landlord this is what I'm going to do. And I would tell the landlord, like, this is the next level. I would say, listen, I've tried to communicate this with you to handle it. It hasn't been handled for this amount of time. I said, I'm going to do it. Of course, this is, if you know how much it's going to cost, I'm going to go, I've gotten a couple of quotes. I have a guy that's going to take care of it, or I'm going to take care of it myself. This is what I'm going to do. It's going to cost me this much. is it okay if I'll give you the receipts and I'll show you that I did it, but can I deduct it from my rent? I'll pay. I'm deducting it. Now,
So,
ideally, the landlord would be agreeable to that, but you're also telling me that they haven't been responsive,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm, right,
So they haven't. You got to this point because they haven't communicated at all.
right.
So again, if there's a chance for them to communicate, you want to give them that opportunity. You're going to have to do what I suggested it that way. It's like, here's what it's going to cost, $100. Here's the thing. I want to deduct it from my rent unless you want to handle it. So please let me know by this and this date, by this and this time, if you're going to do it or not. If not, I'm just going to do it and I'm going to deduct it from my rent. Save the receipts. Then you take care of it. You mail it in to the landlord with proof, that you pay your rent, and then if you pay your rent online, that's fine. And if you make a deduction or there's a note, you have a note for, oh, I deducted $100, and this is why, this is my receipt. Okay.
Is that common?
It happens. I mean, I
It
have
happens.
I have some residents, as an example, that say, listen, I want to repaint my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they said, will you buy me the paint? I said, okay. I said, I don't have to paint your apartment now. It's fine. But they said, well, how about we agree on that? I'm like, okay. Or, this is this, and keeps happening. And for whatever reason, I've tried to fix it as a landlord and I can't, and they know somebody that can fix it, or they have an idea about how to fix it. And they say, how about we fix it and we'll take it off the rent. I'm like, okay, as long as I know how much it's going to be. But that's a situation where I'm in communication with them.
Right. But that's
so
important.
Also, yeah.
Because the tenant is essentially trying to make improvements. This is another situation, but when you're trying to make improvements, even though, let's say, the apartment isn't due for a paint job or some wallpaper, or it's just cosmetic, when you communicate, you might, it might not cost us as a tenant much, because the landlord is like, all right, they want to do it, all right, let's do it. So I think that's super important.
Yeah. 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 And it's the hard part comes sometimes when I have someone a resident that makes a demand that because they don't like something. I'm like, I don't like this tile. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't want wooden cabinets.
Yeah, that's how it was. I mean, I want new
Right.
cabinet. I'm like, okay. I mean, what do you want me to do? I mean,
Right. They
But
work.
again, this goes back to, I think, the offer request advice we had. Hey, how about you could put new cabinets? I'll pay a little bit more rent. I'll do something for you. You do something for me. That's sort of workable. But I think getting back to your rights as a resident, you have the rights for quiet enjoyment, right? And certainly you have to be safe in your home. And there are things that have to do with your apartment being livable place for you. And you need those things fixed. And if the landlord is not responsive, you're entitled to make those corrections. And as long as you give the landlord the chance, but you're entitled to make those corrections and deduct it from your rent.
Right. But importantly, what you said was to not just go and do it. Like, I'm not just going to go fix that light bulb. I'm going to try to communicate with the landlord, say, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing since I've tried to reach you for a month. It's very dark. I'm scared. And it's for safety also. Like, I don't want to be in a dark hallway, as a female or anyone.
And it's easy to change the light bulb, but we're talking probably maybe there's some other issue.
You might need a step ladder. You might need a certain type of light bulb. There could be issues to it. So I think just communicating, hey, this is my plan.
Yep.
And I think to hear this from a landlord to say, yeah, you can say, I'm going to deduct this, but not just doing it. It's important to
Right.
say
Give a
you're going to
chance.
do it. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
important.
I think what I've experienced from a landlord's perspective is sometimes tenants go overboard to get the attention that they want, right? So let me say what that sounds
what is that?
like
Right.
to me sometimes on your no. So let's say, you let's use the example that you brought up, which is fine, that there's a light out for whatever reason. Let's say a fixture is not working in the hallway outside your apartment, and you're concerned for your safety. You've reached out to the landlord, right?
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't been responsive, right? And you could self-correct. You could figure out a way to do it. Now, so is it okay? I'm gonna ask you like one of those questions. Is it okay then for you to not pay your rent at all until that gets fixed?
No, the answer is no, because it's not like an unhabitable place, correct?
So it's overkill for you to not pay
Right.
your entire rent,
Right.
right? So I'm not going to pay my rent until this is taken care of. I'm like, I think we could find some middle ground
Right.
between not paying rent at all to, hey, you're not fixing this. I want to fix it. And you think about incentives, like how can I have someone pay attention to me? How can I get the landlord to pay attention? The answer is some unfortunate situations that landlords, for whatever reason, maybe they're having a problem or some issue, or their team has COVID or I don't know what, but
Right. Anything could happen.
let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Or let's say they're just not responsive for some reason.
They're out of the country.
You have to take care of this. It's not, so you take care of it and you deduct it from the rent like a normal person, but not like don't pay rent until,
Right.
Depends on the gravity of the issue, but you don't have to go all the way in that direction, and that's certainly, those questions are for like when you can't get your landlord on the phone, you could ask the landlord those questions. Those are the type of questions that make sense,
Of course.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. For more episodes, please subscribe to Ask the Landlord on your favorite podcast platform. We'd appreciate it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to watch the show, check out our Ask the Landlord YouTube channel. If you have a question for Albert, feel free to contact him on Instagram at Ask the Landlord and check out his TikTok at Ask the Landlord. Bridging the gap between landlords and tenants, this has been Ask the Landlord. Thanks for listening.